Hello and welcome to Scene South East for the very last time. We're leaving you after 17 years, but I promise you this is not going to be a tearjerker. The mix, I hope, will be as warm, friendly and informative as it's always been. Now, Poland, of course, has been occupying the headlines, and tonight we get an eyewitness account of what's happening there from a Kent man who got out just 24 hours ago. Now, this scene may look Polish, but this is the Sussex that Donald Dougall discovers in the grip of winter. And we look back at some of the landmarks in the Scene South East success story. The sport and leisure news, that of course comes from Malcolm Mitchell and Jill Cochrane. The weather, who else? That will come from Trevor Baker. But we start with the regional news, and tonight that's read by VERONICA, CHARLWOOD.
The hunt is on at Southend for three men who robbed a bingo manager of £4,000 last night. Mr. Henry Barwell was tied up and threatened with violence until he handed over the keys to the safe at Olympia Bingo on the seafront. He's not hurt, but it was some time before he struggled free to raise the alarm. One of the raiders spoke with a Scots accent. Police now believe that the armed man who robbed a supermarket in Brighton last night was also behind another raid at Southwick the previous day. In the Brighton raid, a man armed with a shotgun forced a security guard to hand over £10,000 outside the Fine Fare supermarket in London Road. The previous day, £15,000 was taken from a bank at Southwick. And police in Kent say they're now convinced that two men were involved in yesterday's raid on the sub-post office at Northbourne near Deal. One of them threatened the postmistress with an axe, the other drove the getaway car, a stolen white Ford Escort. The Central Generating Board say their nuclear reactor at the Dungeness B power station should be producing electricity in 3 months' time. That's about 11 years behind schedule, as Steve Clark reports.
The generating boards say they've now finished loading the reactor with plutonium fuel. Tests should start after Christmas, and it's hoped the number 1 reactor will be contributing to the grid by next March. By then, the station, plagued by technical problems for the best part of a decade, will have cost more than £500 million. Work is still going on to finish the number 2 reactor, but the generating boards say this too is now facing difficulties in construction, and it could be some time before it's producing power. Once they're both working, though, they'll make a significant contribution to the national grid. One reactor on its own could produce enough electricity to light up a city the size of Birmingham.
Anthony Wilde, the man arrested last week after an 8-month search by Sussex police, faced a new charge when he appeared before magistrates at Hove today. Wilde, who's 35, was accused of taking part in an armed robbery at a supermarket in Cheltenham last April. He's already been charged with attempted armed robbery at a supermarket in Brighton. Wilde, of no fixed address, was remanded in custody. The Sussex Chief Constable, George Terry, has denied suggestions that his plans to disband the county's radar speed detector teams will lead to a free-for-all on the roads. He says traffic patrols will take over the job.
It means only this: instead of having a team of officers operating radar, and not operating traps, may I say, but making it quite overt when they're carrying out this work, instead of those officers, the traffic patrols, directed, as I've already explained, properly to the areas where they can do the most effective job, where the need is greatest, they will use the radar equipment. So to the public, please remember, speed kills, and we shall still be doing the same thing as we always have done, trying to curb it. And for those offenders who seriously commit excess speeding, they will be dealt with just the same.
The cockle fishermen of Southend and Leigh-on-Sea say they're threatened with bankruptcy because of a new ruling by the Port of London Health Authority. It'll mean they've got to spend thousands of pounds on a processing plant to ensure their shellfish catches are safe to eat. It's because of high levels of pollution in the Thames estuary. But the cocklemen say European regulations are nothing like as strict, and they'll be swamped by cheap imports from Holland. Passenger figures at Gatwick Airport continue to rise. Last month's traffic was 15% up on November 1980. Well over 500,000 people used the airport during the month, and the British Airports Authority say the figure for the year looks like being a record 10.6 million. An argument has broken out in the Conservative constituency party at Dover. The agent, David Mayer, says he's walked out in disagreement about the way the local party is organised. Mr Mayer is already serving out his notice. He's to be made redundant at the end of this month. And finally, the Electricity Council say that all homes in the south which were disconnected in the recent storms have got their supplies back. The last few homes were reconnected last night after 5 days without electricity. That's it. Back to Mike.
Now, the news from Poland is not good. Today came reports of 7 deaths in clashes between miners and the militia. But the real position in the country still remains obscure. 24 hours ago, Richard Lilly, an engineer from Herne Bay, arrived home from Poland. He was one of the first Britons to get out with an eyewitness account. And a few moments ago, Richard Lilly came in and he spoke to me. Mr. Lilly, when did you first realise that the military had taken over in Poland?
4:30 on Sunday morning.
What happened?
I was asleep in my bed in my bedroom in the hotel in northern Poland. There was a hammering on the door. By the time I got out of bed, the security police were already in the room demanding my passport.
Complete search?
No, well, there's not much for them to search. I was naked, and it wasn't funny at the time, but I saw the funny part of it afterwards.
And they were arresting people from Solidarity and other people?
From what we can gather, because I looked out of the window and the whole hotel was ringed by these security police, the special riot police, I think they call them out there.
How tense is the atmosphere on the streets?
Very. People are worried, they don't know what's going to happen to them next. Of course, it's very early days. Although Poland's been used to this sort of tense problem, nobody really expected what was going to happen would happen.
There's so much rumour at the moment and so little is coming out. Is it possible for you to describe what you've seen? Because you're one of the first eyewitnesses we've spoken to.
Well, on the Sunday when we travelled down from the north, we saw the military convoys going in various directions. But actually on the streets of Warsaw, in the 3 days I was in Warsaw before I left, things were relatively calm. The military you see normally during the day were about, with perhaps a few more, but at night they were more foot patrols about, and of course they're all carrying automatic weapons.
What about the friends and colleagues that you've left behind?
Well, some of them have got a lot of problems. Those married to Polish girls can't bring them back out because of this clampdown on the passports. They're obviously very worried about it, and I think an awful lot of people, relatives at home, were also worried because of, as you say, the information isn't coming out.
What about violence? There are reports in the papers today that there has been a certain number of killings.
Well, that's possible. I don't know anything about it. I'd left before any of this happened. Well, judging from the reports I've seen today, anyway.
And how are the people feeling? Is it possible to describe the reaction of Polish people?
Well, bewilderment, for a start. Obviously, apprehension of what's going to happen next.
How much suffering did you find?
Well, there were a lot of shortages in Poland. We know for a fact that some of the hospitals didn't have drugs, that food was difficult to come by, the shops were nearly always empty, and if anything did appear in the shops, you'd get a long queue. It was very much like 1945-46 in this country, at the end of the war, when rationing was still on. And
are you very relieved to be out of Poland?
Well, I can't really describe it. I am relieved in one sense, but worried in another.
Worried for your friends?
For my friends and colleagues.
Will you be going back to carry on your work?
If they'll let me back, yes.
You're not that frightened then?
Oh, no, but, well, it's difficult to describe how I feel at the moment. It was a long journey, and I haven't really had a chance to really decide, but I think I will go back. I've got a job to finish, and I've got some very good friends out there, and I'll be happier when I've seen them, or at least seen them back in this country.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Now, one of the pleasures of, or many pleasures of working on this programme is that now and then when we do an item, something good comes as a result of it. Earlier in the year, we had a social worker from East Sussex explaining a new scheme to get mentally handicapped people out of institutions and into family homes. Well, of course, he needed volunteers, and it seems he got them, as Mike Fuller reports.
This little group makes up the happy success story. Penny Coleman, who suffers from a mental handicap, a slowness to learn, is now enjoying the first proper home she's had for years. Elaine Blackmore, who joined the social services scheme to share her little house near Buxted with Penny, and Elaine's daughter Lucy, who gets as much out of life as any bouncy 6-year-old. Finally, Hugh Card, the specialist social worker whose appeal for helpers to take handicapped people into their lives brought them all together, and it's working very well.
I have done a bit of work with handicapped people and I gave that up this year, but I still wanted to do something for them. I had a spare room in the house and I felt that somebody could make use of it.
It must be difficult because I know you're the best of friends now, but I mean at the time, of course, you're total strangers. Was that difficult?
Well, it is difficult, yes, at first. You have to learn to live together, obviously, and we just got together and it worked out okay for us.
Would you recommend it?
Oh, certainly, yes, I would, because not only is it company for Penny, who lives with us as a family, it's also company for me as well.
Penny works at the local chicken factory and earns enough to pay her own way and her own rent. It's the independence she needed, the break from bed and breakfast accommodation or the imposition upon kind friends.
I never had a chance to go out on my own. I mostly went out with my parents mostly all the time on a Saturday.
And now you've reached real independence?
Yes, I have. Since I've been living with Lane, since I've been living with Lane, I must have been going out on my own, you know. I've got my own back door key, my own front door key. I can go in and out when I want to.
I noticed a difference from when she first came in August, definitely.
Have you?
Yeah, she's very independent now.
Yes.
And I help after herself completely.
Yes, I'm quite happy with Elaine and I help her a lot.
The scheme has now built up 7 or 8 relationships like this, and the numbers are growing.
This has been very successful, and there have been very few problems.
Penny seems to me really quite an ordinary lady, but I suppose she must have some sort of problems.
Yes, I think she's very sociable and quite easy to get on with. Her problems are around self-confidence, and I think that here she's just got the sort of people around her who boost that self-confidence and overcome that problem.
There must presumably be some cases which are very difficult to place.
We have placed 1 or 2 people who haven't quite the same social skills that Penny has, and they've done fairly well too.
Do you think that we helped at all in the summer?
I think you've helped a great deal. Thank you very much.
Good to hear. Now, we've had 1,000 editions of Scene South East in the 16 years we've been on the air, and one thing has remained constant, and that, of course, has been the signature tune. Now, it was written by the Thanet-based musician Wout Steenhuis, and Wout has joined me. It's jolly nice to meet you after all this time.
Yes, I'm not a machine, you know now.
It's called Zonk, a very strange name.
It is. It was invented by Richard Clark. You remember, he was a producer of Scene South East, I don't know how many years ago. And he came from South Africa, and he said zonk in South Africa meant go.
And it's certainly what we're doing right now.
I'm afraid so, yes.
Well, I wonder if we could have it live now, zonk, go, as we come up to the break.
Of course, here it comes, right?
Welcome back. Now, it's been very difficult on the last programme to try and clear up all outstanding business. The great Sussex pudding mystery, for instance, has been solved. Donald Dougall and I have received scores of letters on that subject, more in a moment. But first, let's sit back and enjoy the very last of Donald's walks in the southeast countryside.
Well, obviously a great many people have helped me in my explorations over 10 years, people in forests, on farms. But there was a man we met briefly last week. I'd like you to meet him again. Down on the Sussex Ouse, his name is Jim Smith, and he's a water bailiff, a river keeper. And there we are at Barkham Mills. That's just away upstream from Lewes. There you see Jim, who's explaining his fish ladders to me. Of course, the river is in great flow at the moment. But what happens here in the late autumn? The sea trout run. These are the migratory trout that are born in this river, go away to the sea for 3 or 4 years, and then they return, great strapping fish, maybe 10, 12, 14 pounds of weight. And part of Jim's job, of course, is to care for them. He's been bailiff on the river for 25 years. Bailiff to this very old angling society, the Ouse Angling Preservation Society, which was formed as long ago as 1875, and I reckon that must be one of the oldest fishermen's societies in England. Well, I don't need to tell you that we're in the grip of winter here, but as I've always said, every season has got its beauties. And the riverside, to me, is very beautiful now. This is the time it has its appeal. And here was the old toll road, the original toll gate on this bridge. 1066, we know that there were corn mills here. And indeed, well within living memory, they were burnt to the ground, the last mills on this site at Barkham. Well, of course, Jim has his problems, occasional poachers. He cares for something like 20 miles of river, right away down almost to the estuary at New Haven. And he's got that to look after. He's got his constant war with feral mink. Now, these are the descendants of mink, which long time ago escaped from mink farms in the district. And of course, mink and water, running water, go together. The mink, in fact, breed along the river banks, and they're pretty vicious animals, so one mustn't be too worried about putting them down rather sharply when the time comes, because they are really quite vicious, and they will attack the fish, and pushed into a corner, they'd attack you. Well, there's Jim getting out one of his wire mink traps. This one was a non-starter. Baits these, by the way, with fish heads, place heads. This was a non-starter because it got frozen up. The springing was completely frozen up, and it never caught anything that day. But there's minks as big as your arm down there, down that old river. And one of my favourite rivers too, I think, the Sussex Ouse. It's quiet, it's rather murky, but it's got such a charm, and there's marvellous fishing here in the summer. Well, it's been great walking with you for a long time. Thank you, Mike.
Well, I've enjoyed it, Donald, I tell you. Right, that Sussex Pud, Donald and I solved the mystery. It does exist. It's a smashing recipe, and if you want one, I suggest you write to us here with a stamped and addressed envelope to Southern Television at Dover, our last service to you. Right, nostalgia now, as David Haigh reflects on some of the people that have made this programme what it is.
It wouldn't be right to let this last edition of Scene South East pass without a look back to the early days and the people who've made it so popular. The first time we came on air was the 9th of October 1964, and the programme was then called Friday on 10. A year later it became Scene South East, and during the past 17 years we've screened nearly 1,000 editions. During that time the famous, the not-so-famous, and occasionally the infamous have been in front of our cameras. We've worked in exotic locations like this piece of waste ground, just a place for a group of Austrian folk dancers. Television's endlessly inventive. We've covered news, views, sad stories, happy stories, and we've chronicled changes in style from the swinging 60s to the recession-hit 80s. Some of the people who made those early programmes are still with us, like Jim Smalley, our top lighting man. Celebrities of all shapes and talents have been part of the entertainment. Lenny the Lion was a popular visitor in the early days. And these three lads made songs like Lily the Pink, top of the charts. If you think two of them looked like Roger McGough and John Gorman, you could be right. And there was a young fella from London who dropped in one day. I wonder if he ever made it to the top.
Well, that was David Haigh, of course, looking back, and now the most enduring star of them all, the man who's our longest-serving member of the on-screen people. Here he is, 16 years ago, introducing Sportsfile, and here he is doing the same job and looking, well, perhaps slightly older, but certainly more distinguished.
It's working with people like Mike. Right, well, we're going to start with the football programme, and once again it's been severely hit by the weather. Matches off all over the place, and that's drawn an angry response from the Southern League Secretary, Bill Dello. He says decisions to call off matches so far in advance is absolute nonsense. A referee of many years' experience, he said he would never allow a match to be postponed the day before. They just don't seem to want to play these days, he told me. Well, he particularly singled out Leeds calling off their game with Brighton at the Goldstone Ground tomorrow because they've got several players off with flu. They've plenty of other players, he said. Well, there will be football at the Goldstone tomorrow, with Brighton playing a friendly with Luton. The Southend's third division visit to Burnley is off. No game for Gillingham tomorrow anyway, but they'll be attempting to stage their FA Cup replay on Monday against Barking at Priestfield, and they'll be strengthened by the return of defenders Steve Bruce and John Sharp after suspension. And now the FA Trophy games. Maidstone's match is off. They'll try to play that on Wednesday night. If that fails, it'll be on Monday, December the 28th, with an afternoon kick-off. Gravesend's visit to Epsom and Newell is also postponed. That's now on Tuesday. And there'll be a morning inspection for Dover's visit to Tooting and Mitcham. In the Alliance Premier League, there's an inspection at Dartford tomorrow. And at Southwood Park, Ramsgate's players have been trying to clear frozen snow to give their Southern League game with Ashford a chance. Well, some good rugby matches in prospect over the weekend. That's if the ground allows them to play. Tomorrow's fixtures include some home games for Brighton, Canterbury, Crowborough, Deal. That's a derby with Betsanger. And for East Grinstead, Hastings, Haywards Heath, Lewis and Thanet. And Kent Cup games scheduled for Sunday see Canterbury at home to Brocklians, Betsanger entertain Sidcup, and Ancorians facing the might of Blackheath. Well, Chile anglers could be rewarded with some warming Christmas cheer in a couple of competitions on Sunday. They're at Deal Pier from 10 to 4. And the Broadstairs Vikings competition is on the beaches and piers between Ramsgate and Margate. Well, it's a busy weekend for Ashford athlete Julie Rose. Tomorrow she's aiming for her 5th county title running when she competes in the Kent Women's Cross Country Championships at Cobham Hall School. And on Sunday she has her sights set on an England vest when she runs in an interleague match at Hendon. And we wish her luck. Badminton on Sunday, Kent, last season's beaten finalists, take on Surrey in this year's inter-county competition. Being played at Folkestone Sports Centre, and some of the country's best players are taking part. Now, here's someone else who's good with a racket, or at least making one, Jill Cochrane.
Well, we do all wish you a merry and a happy Christmas in traditional style with music and entertainment. Tonight, Dick Whittington is with the Playmakers at Beltinge Memorial Hall, and the Marlowe in Canterbury's Babes in the Wood starts tomorrow. Blinkin' Father Christmas tomorrow morning at 11:30 in Friars Walk, Lewis is reported to be suitable for children and adults between the ages of 3 and 99, so that includes most of us. While tonight and tomorrow, Toad, Ratty, Mole and Badger are just some of the A.A. Milne characters at St Mary's Hall in Whitstable, and the more modern favourite, Paddington Bear, will no doubt be eating marmalade on the stage of the Granville in Ramsgate. Another bear, the one that couldn't spell, is appearing at the Lees Pavilion in Folkestone from Monday. There's a barn dance tomorrow at the Alexander Centre in Faversham, and the Towner Art Gallery in Eastbourne has a display of local pictures. But it's likely that sometime over the next 2 weeks you'll either hear or be joining in some Christmas music. Oh, come all ye faithful indeed, and why not try and get out and listen to some music this weekend? Follow the Star is at the Assembly Hall, Tunbridge Wells, and tomorrow the Sittingbourne Choral Society are singing in St Michael's Church. On Sunday afternoon, the carol concert in St Nicholas Church, Leeds, begins at 3:15, and the De La Warr concert on Sunday begins at 3. Carols and crib services at St James Church, Edgerton, and the Bethel in St George Road, Hastings, begin at 5:30 and at 6, and the White Rock in Hastings has Christmas music on both Saturday and Sunday evenings. But if you don't want Christmas music at all, well, there's jazz at the Hotel Imperial in Hythe. Now, of course, I won't be here at this desk to tell you about events for the rest of the year and into 1982, so for the final announcement that Christmas carols will even pervade the cross-channel ferries on Monday, with children giving mid-channel carol concerts, I'm sure they and I will want to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. And, of course, that goes for you too, Malcolm.
Thanks, Jill. Well, that's it. Time for me to close Sports File. I've enjoyed being with you. Hope you all have a wonderful Christmas. Mike?
Well, not quite, Malcolm. We're going to give you a little bonus. I know it's always been your ambition to link into Trevor for the weather, so one will go.
I'm absolutely staggered by his generosity. All I can say is that it's been absolutely freezing cold here all day. What we really want to know is whether we're going to get any relief at all from this perishing weather. Trevor has the answer.
I'm sorry to say, Malcolm, there's not the slightest hope of any relief this weekend. It's going to stay very, very cold. But apart from that, it'll be reasonably pleasant because the sun will be shining most of the time during daylight, and there's little, if any, snow about. If there isn't any snow, it'll be in the form of a few showers tonight and tomorrow. We have northerly winds blowing over the country now, and they're bringing showers from the North Sea, where the temperatures are rather higher than over land, bringing them over eastern districts of England. The rest of the country is clear of cloud, and this high over Ireland, which is formed this afternoon, is moving towards us. Now, here's the satellite picture, which shows you what I was talking about. Most of England, Wales and Scotland clear of cloud up as you go northwards, but over the North Sea, these white patches, which are shower clouds, and these are drifting in on the northerly winds to many parts of the country. Right, there's a forecast chart for noon tomorrow. and much of the country will have a dry day apart from a few showers in the extreme east at first. But rain from that approaching system from the Atlantic, the approaching inclusion warm and cold fronts, that'll bring rain into Western Ireland during the course of the afternoon and evening. Sea crossings will be rather rough tonight, but they'll improve slowly during tomorrow. Now, tonight in the southeast, it'll be very, very cold and frosty, with air temperatures falling to around -3 degrees centigrade. Tomorrow, best temperatures just exceeding freezing point. Tonight, there'll be a few showers about in the area, snow showers dotted around. Tomorrow morning, a few showers about as well, but they should die out in the afternoon. Apart from those, it'll be dry and it'll be quite sunny tomorrow. The winds are going to be northerly and breezy tonight, becoming light tomorrow, force 6 to 8 over the sea tonight, becoming lighter, force 3 to 5 during tomorrow. And finally, one wedding tomorrow, Eileen and Arthur at Upper Norwood. They'll have dry and bright weather. That's all. Back to Mike.
Thank you very much indeed, Trevor, and that just leaves me time to say thank you very much indeed for all your loyalty over the years, and thank you very much indeed for all your Christmas cards, all your good luck messages. If time would allow, I would read some of them, because they make good reading, I tell you. So it just leaves me time to say, on behalf of Donald, on behalf of Malcolm, Jill, and all the very many technicians that have been involved in the programme over the years, have a happy Christmas and a very peaceful New Year, as we all say farewell and goodbye.